I mean, the original factory is about 11 miles away from where we're stood now, in the village of Lavenham.
Lavenham, yeah.
We're now in Sudbury, but we've stayed in Suffolk, and that's really, really important to us, that kind of local feel.
That was Jake, Managing Director of Lavenham. As one of the last single-source factory brands remaining in the UK, this is a rare glimpse behind the curtain at an increasingly endangered form of British garment production.
So this is my favourite room. This is a quilting room because this is where the magic happens. Lots of trade secrets go on here. So we run 3 quilters pretty much every day that we're open. There'll be at least 2 machines running. You can hear one that's about to start up. This is being teed up. So next on will be a 70-gram wadding. Okay. And on these 2 rollers, you've got scrim there, which is like the interlayer between here. And then there'll be some fabric that go on. So you can see this fabric in here. It's our recycled poly. And effectively that moves through the machine, is passed through these rollers, and you can see all of those needles and the head there. That is the process happening. So on here, we can program in all of our different quilt patterns. So this is the bit that you're not allowed to, don't give away the trade secrets. But basically, this is, in here we can input any pattern that we want to see come out as a quilt pattern ultimately through. Yeah. And that happens in here. And you can see the ladies here just running some kind of changes of needles and repairs because we're going to be changing up a quilt pattern at the moment. Yeah. And then that's an inspection tunnel, and then the final inspections would kind of happen on here. So this is just quilt going through to scrim because they're changing they'll be changing the pattern, changing the setup. So they're just running this through to bring the fabrics through, and then we'll start a production run.
Because we were here in this factory's been sort of purpose built for everything that goes on.
Yeah, when did we come out here? About 2012, moved into this location. It's been designed with our process, so how we do it. We talk about the Lavenham way because we've been refining it over so many years, and we're not completed the journey. We kind of think about things being a progress all the way through. So yeah, to have our own kind of ready-built factory, it's amazing. This is one of my favourite. I've never actually done it because I'm worried that I'll be told off for health and safety, but it's really tempting just to jump in. But we deal with big 3-dimensional things. Wadding takes up a substantial amount of space in what we do. But again, to your point, that's why we're so lucky to be in a purpose-built factory, because we know that we need that area and it needs to be right next to these machines, and then it can pass through. That's why the fabric room is
because the whole factory kind of weaves in together. It feels very linear the way that the fabric moves into each.
As good factories should. There's a reason that they're on production lines and those things. It needs to travel through, but it's a good narrative to understand. This has been a process that's been handled and touched by people. People have made this all the way through. You can see here, this one's been paused, and this is a point where someone would expect. So they'll literally go from kind of left to right, from top to bottom. As this moves through, you'll have somebody just checking, and then they'll pause the machine for a bit and just double check the stitch count. It allows us to catch potential issues really early in the process. And the difference, I guess, to other forms of outerwear production, if you've got quilting, you're making almost your new fabric from other people's fabrics. So you have to inspect what they've done, then you have to inspect what you've done to change it, and then you have to do all of that, because if you get upstairs to finishing, you start to make a jacket. If you then realise that you've had a misquilt, it's a bit late. So we take a lot of care on that. The quality part for us is it's so fundamental to what we do. It was founded back in 1969, a lady called Mrs. Elliott, and she spotted a gap in the market. The horse rugs at the time were all made of wool. And British climate, lots of rain, they were kind of not really fit for purpose, really heavy, smelly old things. So she developed a quilted, nylon-based horse rug, and that was the first in the world. Sold like hotcakes, you can imagine. And then she followed that up almost straight away with quilted jackets and gilets.
Because I always thought, whenever I read sort of the bios, it was always, first horse rug maker, and then the gilet. I didn't realise how instantaneous that was.
It was pretty quick.
It was 1972, wasn't it?
1972 was the first record that we've got of those going out to market, but we think that probably they started making in kind of 1970-ish. A bit of local trade. Unfortunately, we can't take you to the old factory. That's now a co-op in Lavenham Village. But it's a beautiful, but the history of that, of Lavenham Village is important. That is the original kind of wool capital of the world at the time, kind of back in the medieval era. So it's got a really strong relationship with fabric and production and those things. But this represents the art, kind of a bit of a living, breathing archive. So up here, that is an original horse rug quality, and it's got quite a heavy wadding through it. So if you tried to make a jacket out of that, you wouldn't ever be able to bend your arms. But it does that job really well, and it's important for us to keep things like that here, just as a kind of reference point.
Yeah.
But everything else in here that you can see will be moving through to cutting at some point.
Yeah.
So all of this 2-inch diamond quilt is what we call our classics.
And it was a 2-inch diamond that was the original quilting.
That's the original. When we moved into garment production,
yeah,
it's always been that one. And we've got our quilt pattern has a secret amount of stitches that run through it that only we know. And there's only a few people in this factory that actually know all the details. But there are little parts in this, like we've got a crossover stitch in our diamond and things like that, which have been there since the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
So there's little details in there that if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Originally, the notion of quilting in the patterns is a necessity. It's a practical solution to be fit for purpose. But then obviously it's become something that we've really embraced and taken further. So we've got, just as an example, something here that we've done a contrast quilt pattern. So we've chosen a contrast thread here to pick out the detail of that quilt pattern.
Yeah.
You know, a 2-inch diamond. We have a catalogue of about 5,000 quilts that we've run.
Yeah.
And the list is almost endless of what could be achieved. It all then comes down to how quick that is to quilt. From a factory, it's really important that productivity's up there.
Yeah.
But then also what does it do at a practical level? So if something's not going to ultimately be fit for purpose, as we'd say, and not going to create a great garment, then we won't run it. Yeah. But we'll do quilt tests and slight adaptations.
Yeah. And I guess that's the benefit of being a factory brand is you have that room to experiment, and you have you're not tied to anyone saying, oh, we literally won't do this for you.
We encourage everybody to come and see the process of the jackets and the gilets and how they're made here, and see the people that are doing it. These are really skilled artisans that are finishing things by hand, that they can look at a quilt pattern and tell us, God, that's it's going to look great, but it's going to take 14 days to get to make one jacket, so maybe we should change it. And we trust in that process because we're all one team, and we've got a nice community of people around here, so we just talk to each other and work it out.
Jake revealed more and more about the way modern and legacy techniques were combined to scale up Lavenham's production without sacrificing the culture and tradition of their garment making process.
About 5 years ago, we invested in a new cut machine, a bit like we saw with the quilt pattern machine.
Yeah.
The cut machine also works in that principle, so it's set up with a pattern that we put into the screen, and then, but we've also got hand cut going on against patterns. So the ladies now are laying up. This is bread and butter, probably going out to Japan, I would think, with this quality. Sorry. So the ladies will be bringing this out, checking through, making sure obviously it's all ready to go. Then the pattern ultimately will be laid on top, which is here, and then it goes through and starts to be cut. So a layup like this, these are probably, it looks like these are samples because there's only 3 or 4 kind of being laid up here. But we could probably go to, what's the maximum that we put through on a cut? How many ply? So 20, yeah.
So is that 25 layers of fabric?
Yeah. So if you look through, the blade's going to come down in a set, and there you go. So
oh wow,
it's a very sophisticated machine because as it cuts down, you can see all of these little movements and cut marks. It's going along and just tracing through.
Yeah.
So everything will get touched. Part of what this does, and using this type of process, is it makes us better at what we already did. So probably these ladies will know the most efficient lay to put up anyway. This just ensures we stick to that most efficient lay. So the creating of the pattern is really, really important. But then adhering to that pattern and making sure that we can do that consistently is the key to it. So it just means that we can, as the lady said, we can go to higher stacks and cut through with a level of consistency. We've got this relationship to the British countryside. We were founded by somebody who was, looking for something, but then there's this kind of industrial element of what we do. So the big quilting machines or the cut machines that then dovetail into this notion of countryside, and it's outerwear. You're wearing it outside, and whether it's a kind of a layering gilet like I'm wearing, or one of our long top coats, they are made to be worn and do things in. We've got to help sustain the British countryside because otherwise people aren't going to need the jacket. So it's part of the business plan, to make sure that we're doing all of those things.
Yeah. There's a duty of care, I suppose.
Absolutely, to the artisans that work here. And the country and the countryside that sustains us. So
I was really surprised at how readily accessible legacy tools and designs were across the factory. At every turn, we were reminded of Lavenham's original garments just as much as those on the production floor right now.
So these are all patterns here, but these are
nice.
things that have been cut. So,
And I've noticed there's like a lot of emphasis on archive and
it's really
finding historic pieces,
It's
integrating them back into.
our designer comes and just spends a lot of time walking around and finding things, investigating whether it's previous things that we've made or not made. It got through to the prototyping stage maybe and we didn't complete it for whatever reason. So, or even just go and spend time, like pick out one of these patterns. So that one is a size scale of a jacket that we would have made about 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And to the right eye, that's incredible. That's we might not have the sample of that anymore, but we've got the pattern work, so we can take that out and go, do you know what, that raglan sleeve, that's really interesting. Why don't we look at how a raglan could fit onto something that we're doing now, for example? This is one of my favorite things. It's an eccentricity of something that, shows that kind of the repeat of a business and that we do one thing really, really well.
Yeah.
These are all made from people marking up on this table. So you can see the clear area here is where the fabric goes.
Yeah.
And then people tend to stand on this side rather than that side. So this side is covered with this kind of beautiful pattern, and each mark means that something's been marked up and moved through and then marked down, and then probably the process is carried on and marked up again. It's just one of those little things that I love. It's a living, breathing factory. When you see things like that, it brings it back down to earth. That there are people here that are kind of taking the time and slightly missing the edge.
So is this what comes out of the machine? This is the result?
This is a bundle. So this is a product that's been all the way through cut.
Yeah.
Gets bundled together, so all of the individual parts that we saw going through. So this looks like it's going to be quite a long coat, and then within a bundle you'll have probably 10 jackets in a total bundle. So that bundle then goes into a bin, and that will travel upstairs to the finishing room and then be set behind one of our production lines. And there will be about 2 or 3 processes that happen in there in terms of actually finishing the garment before it goes through to final inspection. So normally they would travel up. The products themselves will travel up in a lift. We're going to take the stairs. Cool.
We made our way up to the sewing floor where the rest of the process takes place. From here, we were able to see the jackets literally coming together and garner an understanding of the intricacies of this type of production.
So here are those bundles we talked about.
Oh, wow.
So these ones, this is kind of at the end of the process. So this is coming into final inspection. But ultimately, that's how things travel around. They travel in bundles because it's a factory. So it's about putting things through all at once so that all of the guys know what they're doing, and we'll see some of the different processes that take place. And so we've got kind of 3 production lines, and then within each line there's certain stages that a jacket or gilet will pass through.
And we're directly above
where
we just were.
Yeah, we're literally above the cut table right now.
Nice.
Receive something in from downstairs, check that everything's in place, check the bundle, check the quality, and then if something needs a quick amend, our big quilt machines, when they go through, sometimes there'll be a missed stitch or something won't have taken properly. But some of these ladies can then take that fabric and put it through a machine and hit the exact holes that the machine had made and re-quilt it by hand. So, that's worth its weight in gold for somebody like us. Not just because it's a nice story and it shows the artisan nature of what we do, but actually because it means that it doesn't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the process. So these, I've got such admiration for everybody on this floor because they, we can talk about jackets and talk about the details. These guys actually make it a reality, and they're fantastic at it.
So walk me through when it gets up to, the fabric gets up here.
So we've come up here, so it'll come up in those bundles of 10 that we saw. That will go through a first inspection. So that's just checking that you've got everything that you need in the bundle, and then each individual piece of that bundle is inspected. And then it can go into the separate stages. So we've got a couple of stages of overlock, first part and second part overlock, and that's where it starts to come together. So the overlocking machines literally run the seams together. So you've got what goes from being a pattern like this, they get brought together according to the pattern, and then it starts to become a 3-dimensional thing. And that's when it really starts to look like a jacket or a gilet, but also it's a tricky stage because you're suddenly gone from flat fabric into a 3-dimensional item. Once it's gone through first part overlock, it depends on the product, but you'll get some form of binding. So that's where we bind on the edges.
Is that that's all corduroy mostly?
Yeah, most of it. We've got an organic cord quality that's prevalent on most of our jackets and gilets, and that's so obviously finishes off the edges, but also gives it it kind of improves the quality and stability of the product. So you go through that, and then it will go on to things like pockets. And then there'll be a kind of second part overlock, and then kind of finishing that we're seeing here really. So that'll be the final finish on things like the seams and the edges onto the sleeve, collars, and you can see at the moment at the top of this jacket, there's going to be that will be trimmed down, and then everything will be folded in, which is a bit of a fiddly one. You've really got to know how to do the final folds to make sure it's a really neat fold that can then be stitched down. Yeah. Any mistakes at this stage, we've got to do a new jacket. Okay. So
this is vital.
And so we've got, what we call inline inspection stations in between. So just somebody takes some work out, does an inspection in case something has happened or we've just missed something earlier in an inspection. It will go all the way through over here, and that will be where, if it's got a press stud or something like that, that will be fastened on. And then after that, it goes through to final inspection. And then finally, very last stage is bagging. Once it's bagged, we're hands off. We kind of don't touch it because it's past everything. We don't want anything to happen to it. So it's sealed and it's bagged. It goes down its chute, then gets boxed up, and then normally ready for a customer collection at that point.
I mean, something I really do like about the inspection as well is they're all signed. Which I think is a really lovely touch.
Let's see if we can find. This is where I get told off by the team, but if you can see in here. So this one's been signed here so that we know who did the final inspection and bagging process before it went out to a customer. And that's just a sign of how much we appreciate what the team here do. And it's nice that they put their kind of finishing touch to it. And we've got some traceability if something goes wrong, we've got that. But it is much more about the kind of end consumer having that relationship to what we do here. We're so proud of what we do and of what this team can make. We want the end consumer to kind of have a sense of that and engage with it. So it was a nice thing that we created this kind of factory label so that there's a final sign off from a real person who really made your coat.
Lovely.
Yeah.
These personal touches aren't the only thing Lavenham does differently. Jake explained how their production methods enable them to take a very different approach to sustainability than other brands.
A lot of the fabric's recycled. I know that there's a push towards that sort of sustainable push.
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult word, I think, because what is sustainable. But what we've taken the decision of was to kind of define it for ourselves. So we talk internally and now externally about being better. So are we incrementally trying to improve things to live within the means of the planet? That's all that we can try and do, because ultimately we are making something. So the recycled fabric is a really good point on that. We work really close with a couple of our mills. So our polyester, which is the bulk of our production, probably about 70, maybe 75% of our business is this poly, but it's a fully recycled quality now. So it's 100% recycled in every colour, and we won't work with any of the polys that are new fabrics that aren't that. If there's anything that we do work with in a poly that isn't recycled, it will be because we've already had it in-house and we want to use up what you've got, because that is a key part of sustainability. We don't want to be one of those businesses that goes out and finds a new supplier and then has to get rid of loads of old terminal stock because it's not sustainable, in inverted commas. We're proud that our factory is now powered by solar.
Oh, wow.
So literally the sun, not that it comes out enough probably.
I was going to say, it's not the best day
It's not the best day for it today, but the fact that we've done that, we've changed to LED bulbs across the entire factory, all of those things talk into the notion of being better. So I always talk about that rather than this notion of sustainability, because I just think it's such a loaded word these days that,
it sort of instantly brings
it's a warning. If you hear an MD or a CEO talk about sustainability, 9 times out of 10, it's not.
So do we start with the archive pieces?
Yeah,
through how these came about.
These, you can see there. So probably that's one of the most recognisable shapes that we do. We call this a Raiden jacket.
Yeah.
But this would have been made in probably the mid-70s. So it's a nylon quality, but that has a really close relationship to kind of what we're doing today. That's just kind of a much more contemporary version of it. This is a women's, that's a men's, but ultimately it's quilted. This one's got a 2-inch diamond quilt. This, we've played with the quilt, so you've got different scales and kind of cut and sew. We've got a contrasted collar. This is the original cord. It's all of those things. There's a direct relationship between these two things. And that, if you said, what's a Lavenham jacket, I think most people think something like that. Yeah. But then again, this was made about 2 years after that. And this is kind of, like we were saying, being informed by what you've already done. That's a pretty cool contemporary jacket.
It's very nice. Is this out from the archive for that reason?
Yeah, exactly. This one I particularly love because it's got detachable sleeves. And so this actually becomes a gilet. We've got, real 70s, nice lining quality in there. But when we look at some of our products and what we're doing, that that can inform exactly what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Again, this is when the production team starts to tell me off, because this will be really expensive to do these days. But there's no reason not to do that.
Yeah.
And some things like colour become really important.
Yeah. So obviously you guys have been working with Rudy for quite a while now.
Yeah, good few years.
Yeah.
What we love about Son of a Stag and working with Rudy is the sense of curation that, you go in the store and you know you've gone somewhere where they've really thought about every single product that's going to be in the store. And then, the selection that Rudy and the team put in for Lavenham, we love. But then working on something like a special, it becomes like a really fun process. So,
because this is one of our exclusives, and I think usually we just play around with the colours and the fabrication. We don't do any sort of design changes, but they're a little bit more SOAS specific, I guess, is the way you say it.
Exactly, yeah. So, to your point, this takes the heritage of the brand for sure. So this is, the horse rug quilt that we saw downstairs.
Yep.
This is it in its all its glory going through. But the change here versus what we've got in the line is going to this cotton fabric as the outer choice compared to the recycled poly that we've got downstairs, and then this great contrast lining. So we call this colourway brick.
Yeah.
So agreeing to brick, it kind of talks into some of that kind of traditional mensweary kind of
military stuff that we do a lot of.
Yeah, but the tone of brick I love, because it just takes it down a little. It's a little bit more subtle, and so it means that it's not trying to compete too much with that kind of archivey world, but it just makes a brilliant product. We've got one of our rules for when we do any project is, are we proud of it, and would we want to sell it ourselves? And well, I'm going to take this sample with me, actually, I think.
You're going to have to talk to Rudy.
Having seen the process from start to finish, I wanted to understand why Lavenham has never moved too far away from where it all began.
And it's still all based in Suffolk.
Yeah.
It's all still in nearby the same village. How important is that to the identity of the brand?
I think it's integral. We're a single source factory, so we make every Lavenham product here, unless it's a kind of collaboration with another factory brand. We've done that a couple of times. Anything that holds a Lavenham label will be made here by our team, because we're so proud of the skill level and the quality that we know that we can provide. And I think it's a big point of difference, and a big part of why we've been so successful in places like Japan. It's a niche brand for sure, because we want to stay doing what we're really good at. We don't want to turn into a lifestyle brand. We want to stay doing our quilted jackets and gilets and taking that to the world.
It's rare but hopeful to see a British factory brand showing the industry how things can be done. Lavenham is one of very few brands that are able to balance contemporary needs without compromising their institutional heritage.